Hi there, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to our roundtable discussion as we explore ways to cultivate agility in product management, as well as how this cultivation affects our day-to-day as product managers. We're going to be touching on some really awesome topics today, such as some of our favorite tools and resources, the future of product management, how do we navigate tough conversations as product managers, and more. This event is geared towards product people like you who want to work better. So definitely stay tuned to hear us dive into those questions and those topics, as well as some of your questions as well. This roundtable is hosted by our team at Crema. We're a digital product agency that uses design, technology, and culture to help individuals and companies thrive. Put simply, we design and build custom software solutions. Be sure to check us out at crema.us. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started by way of introductions. Just to introduce myself, I am Michael Luchin. I am the Director of Product Management at Crema. I've been with Crema for just about 8 years, helping our clients from startups to enterprises build new product and scale and thrive as they shift towards bringing that mindset also in-house. Chanel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm also a product manager here at Crema. I've been with Crema for relatively 6 months, but I've been in product management for the past few years. And very similar to Michael, I help companies establish or develop applications, mobile and web, and help to scale those and bring them to market as well. Brandon?
Yeah, and I'm Brandon Blackman. I've been with Crema for coming on 2 years now, which is crazy. I feel like that went by really, really fast. And I have probably 5 to 7 years in product management. Kind of stumbled into the career when I was hired on by a healthcare supply company to turn their brick and mortar store into an e-commerce store. And that's where I started getting into product management and eventually led to a career. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Without further ado, let's jump into our exciting discussion that we've got planned for today. Everyone watching, if you have any questions, definitely add them to the chat box on the side. We'll try to answer them either at the end or throughout our conversation. All right, so I'm going to kick us off with kind of a big overarching product question, talking a little bit about Agile and really the trust that comes with the Agile process. So how do you approach Agile with clients who might be initially resistant to it, or maybe have their own approach to projects?
I'll take a stab at that first, and then Brandon, feel free to chime in. But I think it can be very challenging to convince clients to either adopt a new approach to projects. And as product managers, it's good to be empathetic with your clients in this case, walk in their shoes a little bit and appreciate the pressures of others. I also think that organizations oftentimes feel the desire to deliver everything at once, or even struggle with deciding what is the right amount of value I need to deliver. And sometimes we tend to fall in what can be considered a waterfall method. So in those cases, I tend to lean on expressing the benefits of Agile so that we can move towards that approach. And one of the key benefits is delivering early versions of the final deliverable as soon as possible helps you to ensure or validate that you're on the right track. And if you need to pivot, know when to pivot and pivot quickly. An additional benefit that I like to express is just to ensure them that the work is collaborative. And I think product managers feel pressure to problem solve for everything. But what I mean in collaborative in this spirit is that it's not only up to you and the team of experts, but also up to those customers to be just as involved and to process their feedback. And lastly, a more tactical approach I would take is one that your stakeholders might enjoy, is that having an Agile approach allows all parties to agree on the scope of the work and be able to assign a deadline against that and when that work will be delivered, while committing to allow it to continue to evolve.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like this is really cliche and to say this for an Agile question like this, but iteratively, I think getting the client to understand it baby pieces at a time, particularly if they are very doubtful of the process. I know a lot of times it can feel more comforting to kind of spend a longer amount of time planning through more of a waterfall approach to product development. But there's, as any Agile product manager would know, there's a lot of validation and a lot of user information that's lost during that process. So being able to identify quick wins that we can deliver to the client, and only Agile can deliver that type of speed and agility. So a tangible example is one of our clients wanted us to build out a large data platform, but a quick win for them was actually putting together a survey that allowed their customers to self-assess themselves. And in more of a waterfall process, there would have been a long development period for building out the survey and data collection model. But we just, through Agile, very quickly put together a Typeform survey, branded it towards their brand, so you could hardly even know it was a Typeform survey, got it into a database that then created custom data visuals. And all of that was done in a couple weeks because of Agile. And so it proved the validation process for them very, very quickly, and was able to deliver something that got them really excited about this new Agile process that their organization hadn't had the ability to use yet.
Yeah, that's awesome. And kind of, if I'm hearing a common theme, it's a bit of like show and tell, like figure out like what are the smallest things that we can do to maybe kind of help clients or stakeholders who are unfamiliar with Agile or a little cautious of it for various reasons, to just kind of show, even if worst case inside a waterfall environment, like show here's how it can work and here's the benefit it can be that can happen from it.
I like that concept of show and tell, because I think on other models of management and just project management in general, you're dependent on status meetings because you don't have that show and tell mindset. And so you're dependent on the team like updating you on where they're at and what kind of progress have they made, and just the general status meeting kind of thing. But with Agile, you always have demos, you have shout outs, you have much more collaborative environment to literally show and tell progress rather than just a plain status meeting.
Right.
Cool. All right, so kind of taking it down from the 50,000 foot level into maybe the 30,000 foot level. Let's talk a little bit about planning. How much do we plan? What is too much? What is too little?
Brandon, you want to take a stab?
I was holding my breath to see if maybe you wanted to go first. So this is a great question. A weakness of mine is my detail orientedness. I wish I was more detail oriented in life. Comparing myself to other product managers, I'm like, if only I could be as detail oriented as them. But that plays a huge part into the planning process, particularly in Agile, because I think there's a balance of not getting too detailed, where you've over planned something that now you're planning for scenarios that may or may not happen. And rather than keeping it at the higher level and being able to plan more tangibly. So a good balance that I like here really depends on the type of team that I have. At Crema, I am spoiled to death by the developers and the designers that we have here, where they're they're experts in their craft. They're able to take high-level concepts at a story level and be able to quickly understand and grasp that and get it to either design or to development. I've been on other teams where maybe there's a language barrier, or we've offshored the development piece of it, and it's a little bit harder to rely on the team to pick up that high-level plan. And so as the product manager, I have to work a little bit harder at being more detailed with the planning and being able to communicate the requirements more concisely and clearly in order to ensure that nothing literally gets lost in translation. So I think a lot of times it depends on the team, but that's kind of my pulse check is the team able to produce the results with the current plan that we have? And if I see anything lagging behind, that's when I adjust my planning and really start focusing more on the details.
I would add to that, and hopefully this isn't long-winded, but I think being a PM always comes with some level of ambiguity. And this question to me really asks what level of ambiguity is okay. I don't think a PM, like you said, Brandon, needs to solve for everything ahead of the project. I I also think that you should at least build a plan for what is the absolute minimum or what is the absolute need, while also not creating new problems for your customers or your team. But there's also another element in this question. I think most people become very hung up, especially for product managers, on detailing a roadmap. But looking at a roadmap, it just shows you point A and point Z. But we don't know all the details yet to get there, a literal roadmap. So we don't know all the pit stops. We can't determine all the rest stations. And honestly, we can't just fully know. But as a PM, this is where you assess what level of ambiguity is okay when those road bumps arise, so that you can pivot quickly and you can already have some guardrails in place so you don't deter you off your path. I like to use analogy. So when you think about it in this way, you'll get to the rest of the mileage, or you'll fill that out as you go. But at first, at least know where's point A, what's point B, and what's your minimum to kind of get you going.
Yeah, that's really great. And ambiguity to me is kind of like the key word I think about when it comes to detail. It's like, and I think it's also the most challenging word associated with good product management, is how comfortable are we as product managers with that ambiguity? It's so easy, I think, to lean into the details and say, let's go and create like really thorough user stories and really thorough product requirement documentation and roadmaps, et cetera, which may be okay, Brandon, as you were saying, dependent on the team. But I think in an idea situation, it's like trying to lean into that ambiguity, say like, maybe there's a healthy amount that can actually bring out greatness from everybody on the product team, the developers, the designers, the test engineers, and help figure out better outcomes, more effective ways of completing user stories and requirements and so on and so forth.
That's great. Yeah.
So let's kind of put on our future goggles a bit. What is something about the future of product management that excites each of you?
Yeah, I actually thought about this, and it's going to be a weird take on it, but product management has the ability to be so diverse and so disruptive. There's no traditional path for product management. If you're looking for a blueprint, I'll just tell you to stop now. But I also think that this is what is going to keep product managing, to keep maturing. And that's what I look forward to. Companies will be born faster, grow faster, and unfortunately could die faster. There's this sense of an ease of creation that will continue to just get easier. And as you combine things such as massive funding, you'll see companies grow and scale. Battles between competitors won't be as long-winded. You'll start to see winners and losers in a period of months. So when you think about this from a product management, this really raises the stakes for product managers of the future, especially if you're in a competitive industry and your company is still searching for product market fit. So there's this pressure to go big or go home or make riskier decisions because these things simply need to happen faster and faster. And so this is a result of this is what I look forward to with product management. No matter where you're at during your product career, you're going to be exposed to more projects, work with more significant companies. And to me, that's what the fun is. You're going to have to learn to get a little bit more crafty and a little bit more savvy. So there's no one theme I would pinpoint it, but just the fact that product management is heavily influenced by external sources. This is what I look forward to in terms of the culture of product management.
Yeah, I love that, Chanel. And I think I'm right in line with that. I think product management as a position or as a career is still fairly new. And I think we've only started seeing the growth in that. And currently I'm reading through the book Empowered by Marty Kagan and Chris Jones. And they make a great point in that book about how if you're a company that doesn't view yourself as a technology company, or that technology is a large part of your company, then you're probably not innovating fast enough. Yeah. And a good sign of that is whether you're in insurance or healthcare or transportation or government, whatever your industry is, if you think that if you need a piece of technology built, or if you need something IT or whatever, and that just goes to a feature team, some team that just fulfills your business need, then there's probably an actual technology company out there. that is with a full product team, with a product manager and developers and designers, that is probably innovating way faster than you. And I know that can be maybe a little controversial, but that is just now starting. Like, there's so many companies out there, so many Fortune 500 companies, so many Fortune 100 or Fortune 50 companies who they don't see themselves as a technology company or as a company that needs to rely on technology in a way that they need full product teams. And they just have these feature teams that they're just saying, hey, build this, hey, build this, hey, build this. And that to me shows that there's huge growth for product management, because all of that will be changing in the future. It has to change because there are companies that are innovating way faster than those companies could ever dream of innovating because of the way they set up their product teams.
Yeah, definitely kind of themes are like speed and craftiness, and also seeing tech as like kind of central to a company. And that's, as you're mentioning from the book Empowered, like Brandon, that's much easier said than done. And it to me, like, absolutely, from what both of you are saying, wholeheartedly agree. I wonder personally, like, what is the human element of this? You're going faster and you're meeting more and more demands. If we keep going down that path, then logically there's going to be a lot of risk of burnout in our industry. There already is. And so I'm a little, I guess, optimistic, if you will, that we are going to be faster, we are going to be craftier, but we're also going to slow down in a way. Maybe we're going to be more intentional with this, where we're adding that speed or where we're adding that craftiness, and focusing more on kind of the human elements, leaning more into that ambiguity that we were just talking about as well.
That's great. Yeah.
That's good.
And speaking of ambiguity, we actually have a question. As product management grows and formalizes in documentation, process, and expectations, how does Crema embrace the ambiguous creativity and not be trapped by our own methodologies?
So my initial reaction to this, and this is just what Crema does, I think it's a great concept. I'm pretty sure we stole it from Google, which is our venture labs. So every other Friday, we dedicate a whole work day, everybody at Crema, to experiment and learn new things that's outside of our client work. And that has, at least myself, allowed me to look at other ways that other product managers are using things, new product management philosophies. It's also allowed me to work on building our own apps. So like right now I'm on a venture lab team building a quote app that helps you manage your quotes. And so because of that, we get to look at new technology like OCR and iOS widgets. And that maybe is not so much in the methodology line, but that time and that dedicated space allows us to learn and explore and experiment with all sorts of things. And the last thing I'll say on that too is, I think if you stay true to Agile, one of the greatest things about Agile is it encourages that experimentation. So that idea of, even within Agile, you can try other methods and other ways of doing things for a single sprint, and then check with the team and be like, did that work for you? Could we change it? Could we make it better? And I think as long as you stay true to the kind of that retrospective mindset of just always looking back and saying what worked, what didn't work, what can we be doing better, you'll always be embracing those new methodologies then.
Yeah, I would just second that. I don't have much to add there, but other than a theme that we're hearing is agility cannot live without ambiguity, and vice versa. So they're one another going to encourage each other. So I agree.
Mm-hmm. And kind of even adding to this, like this is kind of like a bit of a soapbox question for me. There are, by who asked the question, when you say like our own methodologies, I'm assuming you mean like Scrum and Kanban and all the other variations, SAFe, etc. Those are really good, but I think in our industry we have the tendency, and I empathize with this as a process geek myself, to say like, yeah, let's like really lean into that process, and like if we're not going to that process to a T and we don't have 500 certifications each on that specific process, then we're not going to be good. We're not going to be successful. We're not going to be able to be agile. I again, I'm not against that, but I think we've gone a little too far down the very scripted process side that it's almost kind of like kind of getting into the same posture of like waterfall and like command and control type process, except now agile. And so it sounds really simple. Maybe it is, or maybe I'm just not thinking through it enough, but I would just say, let's go back to the Agile manifesto, people over process. Like, it's really fundamental, and listen and empathize with what your team needs.
To add to that, Michael, I'm so glad you mentioned the people over process, because that's what was going through my head as you were talking. And it also reminds me of what you said earlier about what excites you about product management in the future is maybe the ability for us to slow down. Like, even amongst this demand to be faster and to do more, there's also this like intentionality and the ability to slow it down a bit. And I think a lot of that comes into like focusing on the people that are on your team. Like, the faster things happen and the more that we want to get done, the less we tend to think about the people, and the more we rely on process, because process can always be tweaked and always be more efficient and just keep churning and churning and churning. But this idea of like slowing down and remembering that at the core of what we do, it's working with people on our team, but also what we're building is for people, like our users, and what we're building is hopefully making their lives better as well. And so yeah, that principle of people over process will hopefully keep us from getting trapped in our own methodologies.
Absolutely. So let's shift gears a bit. We might have some folks watching right now who maybe are pursuing their first foray into product management. What should a new product manager focus on in the first 100 days of their role?
I definitely think that my primary focus when I am starting out with a new company or in product management period is obviously get extremely familiar with the product that you are building. And with that, everyone always says ask all the questions, any and all, but I would encourage you to say out loud the areas that you aren't sure about or you just don't know. And you may not be able to formalize that in terms of a question, but you can at least say, hey, I don't know what this is, or here's where my cloud is, help me fill it in. Because I think what Crema does a great job is, as a newcomer, you may not necessarily have all the right questions, or you just don't know what to ask if you don't know. But me vocalizing, saying, you know what, here's where my emptiness is. Is it something that you can help me to fill it in? That helps to not only grow you as a PM, but also reassert you in what you're learning. I think also another good focal point is to study the processes and the tools that are in place, not only just to become familiar with them, but also so you can identify what you want to change or maybe implement that you may see to help make the team better and the product better. And last but not least, I have adopted for myself is creating your own personal roadmap and maybe assessing that every 30 days, seeing where you're actually at and how you need to shift as a PM, or what needs to be added in that roadmap to make you the best and most efficient PM you can be.
That's good. I think this idea of like 100 days obviously reminds me of like when a new president takes office and he or she at the end of the 100 days has this time period where they look back and they're able to list some accomplishments of things that they were able to quickly win and quickly get started with. And so there's that aspect of it, of looking at the 100 days in front of you and saying, where are some areas that I can deliver quick wins to the team to show that I've fully stepped into this role, that I can be trusted, and here are some things that we've gotten started right off the bat. But a really important part of this, and Chanel mentioned it, is there has to be a large portion. I don't know what the actual number is. Like if it's 100 days, maybe it's 20%, maybe it's 30%, maybe it's 50% of you're really just there listening and asking questions. Like, you don't want to rush through that. When I saw this question, my first reaction was like, oh, the whole 100 days, like just listen, just ask questions. But I do think results are important in those first 100 days to build trust from the team and to show that you can produce something for the team. So there does have to be some sort of outcomes that you can deliver in the first 100 days. But yeah, a large portion of that has to be listening and asking questions.
Yeah, I love just the focus on questions. It's definitely one of the things we prioritize at Crema is there's no bad questions, and especially coming from the PM, there's probably several others on the team who might have that same question, even if they've been working on the product for a while already. So being able to elevate that helps also elevate everyone on the team. And I think speaking of elevation, it's not just about doing awesome stuff in the first 100 days. It's about doing awesome stuff through our careers. So kind of shifting into resources, like what are some of your favorite resources for learning right now? Books, articles, folks you're following on Twitter, etc.
Brandon, you want to go?
You want me to take it? So I mentioned I'm reading Empowered by Marty Kagan and Chris Jones. I did not read Inspired, which is their first, they had written Inspired before Empowered. So that's on my list right now. So mainly books, but also we're members of Mind the Product. So plugging Mind the Product here. That is a great spot for those type of resources. Their emails, newsletters have been really helpful to me in kind of guiding me to areas of interest for me as a product manager. And then I think also, I don't know if this is considered a resource, but kind of goes into that experimentation. I really love just diving in. I'm very tactile. And so I know product management is a lot of meetings and a lot of relationship building, but anywhere that I can build with my own hands. So there's softwares like Coda, which is a doc tool, Airtable, like all these no code platforms that I can get in there and just kind of build my own things. I follow Agile process, even with myself, from story mapping to thinking through the user stories to complete a certain task. And I just build things on no code platforms. And so I feel like those are good resources for me to learn at too.
Yeah, I will add to that to say that for me, I don't have a designated go-to spot. I also do tap into Mind the Product. I also like Women in Product. I follow them pretty heavily in the product school, but there's nothing like a good conference as well. But I think Brandon said it too. There's no traditional schooling or education path for product management. And I actually have a very untraditional background, how I landed in this career. And so I always like to coin the phrase, I'm not an expert, but I do have experience. And so I think that is what is the most valuable resource when you're a product manager or getting into the world of product management is the experience, because there's a multitude of ways to learn how to product manage or what is the best way to product manage. And so I just will always lead with that being my number one resource. And then there's a secondary element of tangible resources that I go to.
That's good.
Yeah, that is really awesome. I'm not an expert, but I do have experience. And, if I may, I think that is also just valuable to carry throughout a product management career in general, because it allows you to bring up a posture of empathy to skills that we're not necessarily experts in, design and development and testing. And it opens up so much potential around that. I think think about what I'm reading right now. We're all reading Empowered and discussing it because it's just so core to focusing on people, the product, not necessarily the how or the execution of the product. But outside of that, I recently read this book called How to Take Smart Notes. Came out a few years ago. If you're familiar with tools like Rome Research, it has a lot of influence around how you actually pull back and retrieve that information. And because constant improvement is one of our key values at Crema, to always continuously look for ways to improve and learning, this book is all about having that framework that allows us to do that. It's about how do you actually consume information? How do you make sure that what you're reading in books you're actually retaining and maybe even challenging the author on to create new thoughts that can help drive forward ultimately our craft of product management. So speaking a little bit of tools, because I mentioned Rome, I was trying to hold back from talking about tools, which is really hard for me. What are some of your favorite personal tools to help you manage your products? like note-taking apps, to-dos, physical books, etc.?
Yeah, I am old school, so I definitely like old school pen and paper and sticky notes. Those will never die, and for me at least. But if I had to think of other tools, I definitely use the agenda app on my computer. It helps me to categorize the different projects I'm on and keep those notes all in one place. And then also kind of keep track of my daily to-dos and weekly to-dos in that same element. I have a immense amount of love for Miro. I think it's a great way to combine the standard text content with your visual design, and especially for your designers, for your developers, for your stakeholders. It's just a landing space for everyone to kind of follow the same story. And you can do so much in there, from different templates to, holding retros or just note-taking, however you see fit. But those are kind of my key tools outside of your standard Jira and Confluence tools as well.
Yeah, I think I just echo all the tools that Chanel said. I use the bullet journaling method. I'm a big hashtag Bujo fan. If anybody is into bullet journaling, that's the community online. And so I like the pen and paper aspect. And I like being able to reflect back on my day and organize the coming days. But Jira is huge for me, and Miro, and Confluence. So anything that I can do to bring those tools together is super, super helpful. I love that Miro has the integrations with Jira and Confluence. I love that Confluence and Jira, you can be taking meeting notes from your kickoff and all in one click also create a user story from that note and be able to track that all the way through. And then in Miro, when you're story mapping, being able to turn those story cards into Jira cards and that they stay synced up together is extremely helpful. Anyone listening that has some free dev time, I would love a better Figma and Miro integration where you can somehow put the Figma designs that our designers do embed it better inside of Miro, because that would be amazing. I think it's a little bit lagging right now, but that would be a great tool.
Yes, definitely seconded. And also, Brandon, I like what you were talking about in terms of like the integrations between like Miro and Jira. That's like one of the, I think kind of like one of our guiding principles for when we look at new tools at Crema is, can this easily be integrated with other workflows? Because we're always working in like different systems, even different Jiras for different clients. And so just being able to make sure like everything can kind of sync together to help alleviate any like workflow disconnects is ultimately like super effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to kind of add a little bit to this, I'm going to try to hold back because I love tools. One tool that has been just absolutely life-changing has been Loom, which is a tool for creating quick video screen shares. Especially like for me personally, early in the pandemic, had to stay home with my son, which meant my workday was completely scattered. Daycares are closed and everything. And Loom allowed us to like really switch into async collaboration in a really effective human-to-human way, because it's based on video and screen sharing. We didn't really have that before. I mean, you had screen sharing tools, but Loom makes it so fast and so easy that it can allow you to really like not have many meetings that you might be having synchronously today. That has been a huge change. I think it's like just right underneath Miro in terms of a number two impactful tool to our team. Personally, I'm a huge fan of the to-do app, Todoist. It has stuck for years after experimenting with some other to-do apps. I also love this app called Fantastical for Mac, which is really great, especially since pretty much the whole world is working remote right now. It allows easy sync and being able to see various time zones when you're scheduling meetings and Zoom calls and so on and so forth. And then I also have to give a shout out to Bear app for note-taking. That's my personal note-taking app of choice. Beautiful, beautiful design. And also, I think a really great example of an awesome product company. If you check out their Reddit, like they are so like, I don't want to say slow, but I would say intentional with how they're crafting their product over time, and really just say, no, we're not going to share public timelines or roadmaps, even though we have our sights set on these big things. Good product takes time. So shifting a little bit back into product, how do we balance when it's the time to be more tactile as a product manager versus when it's time to coach and be more supportive?
This is an area that I am still growing and learning in. But I will say, when I think about this question, I definitely think of it in terms of the product journey a little bit, in terms of maybe we're more tactical when we are actually in the planning phase and the implementation phase. We're actually getting into those details a little bit more. And it's easier for us to measure out those goals. But I think when it's time for us to be more coach-like or supportive, or even more facilitate, is maybe in that strategy piece that comes well before the planning. You can kind of get into a little bit more understanding, well, what is the problem? Allowing the team to also be a little bit more creative and collaborative in fine-tuning what way we want to go. And I think that's when we as product managers need to be a little bit more open in the conversation and allow the conversation to kind of take its own nature, before we move more into, okay, guys, here's where we need to take steps. Here's where we need to take action. That's one approach. Again, that's not a standard. There's no standard way. I think when you get into projects, you'll run into a few clouds along the way that you may have to pull back and say, you know what, maybe we need to strategize and resync before we can actually go through with these actionable items. But if I had to think about it from a high level perspective, that's one example in terms of knowing when to balance the two.
Yeah, I don't think I have a lot more to add on that one. I agree with Chanel on that, of kind of balancing the two. I also think the cadence isn't as black and white as this, but for user stories, for example, like being very tactile and creating the user stories and having a well-groomed backlog is one thing. But then as the team is like working through those stories and inside of when the sprint is actually happening, the prep work is where the tactile happens. And then during the actual actions of the sprint, as the team is working through it, I think that's where it's maybe there's an opportunity for you to be more of a coach and support. And I think part of coaching and supporting too is remembering that you're there as a product manager to really clear the way for your team, like making sure the path is clear for them. And if they're struggling, perhaps there's an area to coach them, but it could mean that there's an area for you to improve too as a product manager. And so just finding ways that you can further support your team, and that kind of kicks you back into the tactile side of it then again, of just getting more tactile then and doing more as a product manager on that end.
Yeah, I see as like the need to be tactile is really about us kind of paving the road for our team to continue to go down. We got to make sure there's a road, or at least a gravel road in some cases, to continue to go down that path. And coaching, I think, especially on a product team level, one of the things that we don't believe in at Crema is that product managers are people managers. They are working on managing the product, and they are peers to the rest of the team. And so when we think about coaching, like one of the things that is really powerful is just viewing that as a mindset of curiosity, especially when we're talking with our peers, like, why are we thinking about approaching design this way? What do we think about those user test results? Because that isn't necessarily trying to get too tactile. It's actually trying to bubble up, I think, our collective expertise that we have within the team, and making sure that there's a way and an opportunity to kind of have all that manifest itself. So, business needs. Sometimes business needs press up against product needs. How do you balance the two? And how do you keep a healthy environment set up for your team during all that?
That's really good. I don't know if this is the direction that the question is intended to go, but the tweet that you shared earlier this morning, Michael, on another call about when the business presents solutions, saying, hey, we need to do this solution. As a product manager, being able to get at the problem that they're solving for is really helpful. So if they say, we need this feature to solve, to create this solution, really digging in and saying, why do they need the feature? Like, what problem do they think they're solving with that? And then presenting that problem to the team and including the business side in on that side of it. I'm willing to bet that a product team or a team, including business stakeholders, when they're at the table together looking at a problem, will come up with a variety of solutions, most likely better than the single solution that was provided by a single person in a siloed department of an organization. And so just being a part of that and engaging with that probably creates better solutions that even the person who presented the original solution would say, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. That would definitely solve the problem better than I was originally thinking.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's important to, like you kind of said it, don't be so locked in on that one way, that singular solution. I think it's important for product managers to explore the variation of options and then get to the outcome from there. One thing I would add to this, though, the second part of this question is how do you keep a healthy environment set up for your team? And I think this question really speaks to how do we perform as better advocates for our team as well as the product? And I think in this case where business needs push up against product needs, and it's going to happen, I would encourage our product managers to feel empowered to challenge those needs when necessary. That way that establishes you as a more polished advocate, not only for your team, but also the product. And if it is a constant, if you find that you're constantly running into this, then I would also encourage you all to revisit the strategy or what is the long-term game here at play, because you may find that some things have shifted. Maybe the priority has shifted. Maybe the focus is off a little bit. Maybe we need to go back to the drawing board. So I would just mirror everything Brandon said, but also feel empowered to challenge and be an advocate for your team as well to remain that healthy space.
Love it. And speaking of challenging, how do we manage tough conversations with the client when goals or certain things like that cannot be met?
Those are always difficult conversations.
They are, and no one really enjoys having them, right? It's also why we set realistic expectations, but sometimes things happen. I'll take a stab at it, and this again is just my personal experience. When it's time to have those tough conversations, when we know a goal cannot be met, I try to be as clear as possible with the client, and I want to make sure that it's not interpreted as aggressive or stern. More so, maybe let's set the talking points ahead of time and focus on the facts and what we know happened and what we know could have been avoided. I think this is a great opportunity for us to massage and work our soft skills so that you can handle this conversation in a delicate manner that one shows that you still know what you're doing, you're still capable of managing, but also very important that you're establishing an environment of honesty. And that's going to play into relationship building and trust later on. Lastly, I just try to aim for understanding on both parties and propose either some viable options. Usually I like to still come to the client with some options, even though I know the goal can't be met, or even propose that we find a solution together. And that may get you back on track to actually being more collaborative and avoiding having to have that tough conversation again later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so much of the tough conversation actually happens days, weeks, months before the actual conversation. Like, I think, and that's hard, and I could talk a lot on that, but being able to just be very honest and transparent with your stakeholders throughout the entire process will prevent a situation where they are surprised all of a sudden by this goal that cannot be met. And it's like, we've been working towards that goal for the last 12 months. How in the world did all of a sudden on, the last minute I hear that we're not going to meet the goal. That should never be the case. Like, it should be very often like saying every decision that's made, like being able to tie that decision and say, okay, by committing to this decision, we put this goal down the road at risk. And just having those type of conversations make it to where when we did risk it and when we did miss the goal, we're able to look back and say, it was because of this decision right here that we collectively made. There's no finger pointing in that conversation. Like, this was the decision that was made. This was the decision that we committed to, and we knew the risks. So that's the ideal situation. I have, though, either because of hidden blind spots that I refuse to look at, or because it really did sneak up on us, had those conversations where it was going to be a surprise to the client. I think that's where just, again, being honest, prepping them as much as possible so they have time to think about it. And then also being able to, like Chanel said, provide solutions and options for those solutions. And yeah, just taking responsibility too, where responsibility needs to be taken.
Yeah, there's definitely values of like being transparent throughout the entire process. Not being afraid to have these tough conversations. Perhaps certainly a timeliness aspect to these conversations. And I think one of the things that I've seen time and time again, and this is one of the things I love about our team, is that we always have the best interests of our clients at heart. And so when we often have these challenging, tough conversations, what's usually happened is our relationship actually is stronger with our clients. Our partnership is stronger on the back end of that. And it's built up from that, not built down. And that's always exciting to see.
Yeah.
I want to take an audience question real quick from Rick Gibson. He asked, do we have a quality standard for good user stories? And how do we coach and cultivate in general just the practice of capturing good user stories?
So what I like to think about, or just a good rule of thumb, and I'm constantly getting better at this. I've messed up in the past, probably more recently than I'd care to admit, on missing this quality bar. But does the user story, wherever it's documented, so for us it's in Jira, can it act as the source of truth for everyone on the team? So you should not have requirements on a user story spread throughout 3 different tools. It's okay if that's how they got gathered, but at the end of the day, there needs to be a central location for that user story, and it needs to answer the questions that everyone on the team might be asking. So it needs to answer the designers' questions, the stakeholders' questions, the developers' questions, the test engineers' questions. And if it's missing anything, that's where you then add that to that user story. So that kind of goes back to like how detailed do you get in the planning part of it. Because I don't think you need to just like overkill the story with all of these requirements, but encourage the team where if they have a question about a user story to actually ask the question in the user story. We use Slack a lot, and so the temptation's always to like reach out on Slack, and that's okay to start it there, but always get that question or the solution to the question into the user story, because that's where those requirements will just naturally be built. And you have this running archive of conversations and development for those requirements. And then you don't have to spend too much time spinning your wheels trying to think of every question that someone might be trying to ask and put that into the requirements.
And I would also add that I think sometimes we jump to what are the requirements. And I actually learned this from someone else, so I can't take credit for it, but we jump into what are the requirements that we need to spell out on these user stories. However, I've tried to change my mental to think more of what are the user needs that we need to understand, and what does that look like, versus saying, here's what was required, this is what we know. User needs speak more to like the holistic view. This is how we know the user interprets it today. This is where, their problem exists. This is what they need to get out of this. And so I think it adds more to the conversation element, and it takes away, or it doesn't lock you into being prescriptive. Because I think requirements sometimes when we even for not intending to, when we look at requirements and we spell out requirements, we end up creating exactly what those requirements say versus creating and solving for what the problem was. So I think that's just another good quality check when you're creating these user stories. More so ask yourself, what are the user needs versus saying, what am I required to put in here? If there's some hard things you can't get around, yes, but make sure we frame our mind to ask the right question so we can answer it in the best way.
I love that. And to add on to that too, Chanel, and this is going more towards the part of the question of how do you coach and cultivate the practice of capturing good user stories, making sure you're not writing those in isolation. I think as a product manager, I came in thinking, this is what the product manager does. I'll take care of this. And if I don't know something, I'll reach out to the person that would know. But it was a game changer for me to have the entire product team on a call, looking at a Miro whiteboard, story mapping these stories out, and hearing everybody's perspective on it. Because I would write what I think is a requirement, but really it wasn't such a requirement. And if I would have stayed focused more on the user's needs, I'd find out that whatever that need is, it doesn't need a full-fledged requirement discussion around it. It's just, I can trust my developer or the designer to do, to fulfill that need. I don't have to think about like the hard stops in there because I don't think I have the right kind of insight for that. So yeah, just collectively and collaboratively writing those user stories. Don't try to own that yourself as a product manager.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything that's been said. The way I think one of the themes throughout our discussion today has been ambiguity. And I think user stories is certainly one of the actual manifestations of where ambiguity can have the opportunity to thrive, depending on the speed of development and the needs of the product that we're building. Sometimes user stories may be very high level, like pretty much just the high level user story. And sometimes we might have the luxury of being able to add more detail and spend more R&D time fleshing out those stories. And so I think it's up to us as product managers to figure out, again, focusing on the people of the team, what is kind of that right balance that gives just enough detail that we can move forward, but also empowers them to be able to lean into their expertise of development, design, and testing, to have wiggle room within that user story for execution. It is very tough, and sometimes there's growing pains with that, but ultimately it puts a focus on user stories as a tool for generating outcomes, and not, Chanel, as you were alluding to, a tool for just focusing on like requirements. So we're getting near the end. I think I want to ask one more question, and then definitely from everyone watching right now, if you have any questions that you want us to look at, drop them in the chat box. So Chanel and Brandon, how do we connect and contribute to the broader product management community?
I would say just a few things. Obviously, like today is a prime example. Content like today is one way that Crema gets out there, but I myself do, I don't even know if you all knew this, but I have actually charged myself to start mentoring a few startups. And
Awesome.
those that can't really have or afford a product manager, I just kind of give my efforts towards that as I can, and even just connecting with a few other organizations that have cohorts in place in the city. That's one way that I do start to connect with the broader community, because I do think, like I said, product management is a very untraditional path, and honestly, product management does not just only live in the tech space. When you think about it, you can really adopt a lot of the philosophies of product management in a multitude of ways with multiple different variations of industries. But that's the way I tend to connect, is mentorship and creating content like today. And then anything else that may come my way, obviously, I will try to tune into.
Yeah, I'm trying to get better personally at involving myself in primarily right now online forums of whether that's like a virtual book club or a product management Slack channel. But I'm looking forward to the day when we can all get together in large groups again, because I think those conferences are, although we can see that we can do it virtually, I think it's invaluable to be able to be face-to-face with people and interacting with people. and also like local happy hours and like seeing these local product management communities spark up have been really cool too. So I'm trying to lean into that. It's always awkward to meet a bunch of strangers, especially virtually, but trying to get better at that and engage the community more in that way.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of creative ways for us to do that. That's exciting during a pandemic. There's limitations to in person, but there's definitely exciting ways that we can do that, whether it's through engaging in on those online forums, through LinkedIn or Twitter. I think there's a lot that our very human focus on product management has to contribute to kind of the sphere of all the product discussions going on. And so being able to engage in those online discussions is so important. All right, a question just came in and we only have a few minutes left, so we're going to try to rapid fire these. One is, how do you differentiate the product management role from the product owner role? Do we also have product owners?
I would love to take this question. So
too, but go ahead, Brandon.
Okay, we'll trade off just real quick. So I am very passionate about the product owner role actually cycling through the product team. I've been trying to get more creative with like ways that this could happen, but I think there's certain areas of the product that a person owns as the product owner, but then that product owner isn't experts in other areas of the product. And so being able to cycle that product ownership role isn't necessarily as much of like a position, like product management's a title, it's a position. Product owner is more of it's more of transitional. It can cycle through. And so that's where I've been leaning into. Crema does not have product owners. We typically look at like our clients and our stakeholders as the product owner. But even in that, like how can we cycle that through and identify more than just one product owner role, but actually spread that out throughout the entire team?
Yeah. And I'll rapid fire this really quick too. I have a different experience. I have been in a position where I've kind of played both roles. Crema luckily lets us be end to end, in my opinion. But if I had to differentiate or slice and dice, the product manager, in my opinion, really helps get the forefront of things going. So they're really into the strategy, understanding the market, the focus, as well as the business aspects. The product owner starts to marry into that, in my opinion, with the planning and the execution, the implementation process of things. So that's another way I have seen it done in terms of how do you marry the two. And they both own equally just as much stake in the game when it comes to that. It's just maybe the product manager is thinking more holistically and the product owner is thinking more day-to-day in the weeds, the details. So.
Awesome. And last question for now. What are oversights new designers tend to make when joining a new team?
I don't know if this is tend to, but this is my most recent experience. New designers sometimes, in the same way that product managers like to over plan things, I think designers like to over conceptualize, like with maybe like just the way their creative process before they actually get into wireframing or before they actually start creating designs. They can spend a lot of time, maybe too much time, because they're new. And so they feel maybe a little bit insecure or not as confident to jump into the design and actually start designing something. And I just like encouraging new designers to, yes, spend that time kind of tilling the soil up front, but don't get lost in that. I want to push you to actually and for lack of better words, like let's put ink to paper kind of thing. And like, let's see what type of designs you have floating in your head right now. And we can learn from that. So the faster you can kind of get to those actual designs, I think the better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Don't be afraid to lean in on your insecurities and let that I should say, I call it emptiness, but that unsureness live out and let the team kind of carry you through that. So,
yeah.
And just to kind of wrap this up, I think this isn't just for designers, it's for really any craft on a product team. It's about like trying to just be more okay with those insecurities that you might have and leaning into the trust of the team and figuring out like what is kind of the minimal thing I can throw out into the team's combined mental space. So that way we can move forward as one towards the goals and outcomes that we're trying to solve for our products. Speaking of outcomes, we are at the end of our time today. Brandon and Chanel, this has been a really fun discussion. And for those of you who have tuned in, thank you for joining us. If you like this content, definitely check out our other content on YouTube and check us out at crema.us. Also, be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube page. Otherwise, we will see you in some future videos. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks.